Hello and welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, the fertility podcast here to guide you through the roller coaster of trying to conceive. I'm Hannah, your host, a fertility acupuncturist with clinics in London and across the UK. Our patients tell us how frustrated they feel about their lack of fertility education. So this podcast aims to provide all that education they never taught you in school, with the aim of putting you back in control of your fertility journey. We also have our fertility community to help address isolation and provide further information and support. To join us, the link is in the show notes. Before we start this episode, I'm sneaking in to tell you about our upcoming course, Teaching to Conceive. It's 6 weeks of fertility information, education and support. If you'd like to find out more, just follow the link. It's at the end of the show. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to have you with us today. We are going to be talking all about the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle. And full disclosure, this is Katie and I's first recording since the summer holidays, because the first part of this series we did because we were organised, we were ahead of the time, and we wanted to, make sure we had some good content to put out in September. But now we are caught up with each other live. So Katie, how was your summer? Tell us, how did you get on?
It's really nice. I had quite a bit of time off, which was just lovely. Went to Croatia for a while. I was just saying that I swam in the salty sea and was floating, and I was like, life is amazing. And I was like, I should go on holiday a bit more often.
Oh yeah.
No, it was really nice. How was your summer, Hannah?
Well, mine was not floating in the sea. Mine was pissing it down in Scotland in the Lake District. But it was still lovely.
So it's a different kind of beauty.
A different type of beauty. There was one day in Scotland where it was double rain. Like when you look at the weather forecast, I'm always like, is it single rain? Is it double rain? Is there a sunshine? It was double rain all day, for 12 hours. And I have never, ever seen rain like it. But anyway, that's the risk of going to Scotland in the summer holidays.
It does sound about right for Scotland in the summer.
Yeah. But it's lovely to be back and it's lovely to see you again. And are you a fan of the old September?
Yeah. Well, it's my birthday on the 1st, so I always feel like it's just like, have a birthday, and then it's that back to school thing. And I also loved that my birthday was on the 1st of September because I only had my birthday at school once ever. So I still never work on my birthday because I'm like, no, it's my birthday, then we go back to school. So yeah, big fan of it.
Oh, well, it's lovely to be back, and it's always lovely to be back doing the podcast. And so what we're talking about today is the luteal phase. So we're doing a series about each phase of the menstrual cycle. And the luteal phase, I know we say this at the beginning of every single one, but the luteal phase is a really important phase of your cycle. So Katie, tell us what is the luteal phase? What are we talking about? And why is it so important for your health and for your fertility?
So the luteal phase is the second part of your menstrual cycle. So from ovulation up until your next period starts. So in the luteal phase, progesterone is that dominant hormone, and it's the hormone that's your progestation hormone. So it's the hormone that's really important in terms of early pregnancy, but also helps to kind of manage a lot of the symptoms that a lot of people experience in the second half of their cycle. So those PMS symptoms that we think about. So yeah, it's a really important one to have an awareness of and to know what to look out for when, particularly when you're trying to conceive, because it's that start of any potential pregnancy really starting to grow.
And I always think it's really interesting because in many ways, the body assumes that it's pregnant in the luteal phase. And I'm sure, again, we always like to talk in our medical interpretation of events, but your body is under the influence of the hormone progesterone, as you've just said. And because of this, your body does assume that it's pregnant. So until your progesterone levels drop and your body is signaled that you are not pregnant and therefore your period starts, it assumes that you are pregnant. And so, that it is well documented that you are more likely to want to stay in during this phase of your menstrual cycle. You're more likely to want to eat more. You're more likely to take less risk because your body's basically protecting any potential pregnancy, whether it's there or not, which always absolutely blows my mind.
Yeah, same, bonkers.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about signs that you might have problems in this part of the menstrual cycle. So the big problem with the luteal phase is that if you have a luteal phase that is too short, so in an ideal world, we are looking for a luteal phase that is at least 12 days. So it can only be between, it can only be a maximum of 16. Is that right, Katie?
Yeah.
16. So it can only be a maximum of 16 days because after 16 days, your progesterone levels will fall because the corpus luteum that's making the progesterone collapses and it cannot sustain itself for longer than that period of time unless you are pregnant. But at the other end of the spectrum, we want at least 12 days because we need enough time for the sperm and egg to meet. We need enough time for the embryo to form and then the embryo to travel down the fallopian tube into the uterus cavity and embed into your uterus lining. And so it is estimated that that takes approximately 10, 11, 12 days. Nobody really knows for sure because it's kind of a window. We call it an implantation window. Often this coincides, if you've got a textbook cycle, this will coincide with day 21. So if you've ovulated on day 14, it's around day 21, which is the peak point of which your progesterone is being produced. So it is thought that you have high progesterone receptors, which are there to encourage and support that implantation. So this is kind of the implantation window. So we need 10 to 12 days. And if you've got a phase that is shorter than that, then it could be an issue because there could be not enough time for implantation to be happening. And it could be that any embryo is being lost as your lining shed. I guess another big sign that you've got problems with your progesterone or your luteal phase is that you might have spotting for a number of days. So lots of people, especially ones that we work with, it might be that their bleed doesn't come until, let's say, 14 days after they've ovulated, but the 4 days before that full flow starts, they've got spotting. And spotting is the sign that your uterus lining is beginning to shed. And again, this could be impacting your ability to conceive. So definitely something to look out for, which is why we talk about tracking so much, because it gives you that information into what might be happening. Katie, there's something else that I've missed, isn't there, about signs of luteal phase problems? Can you think?
I mean,
do you know?
Like some PMSy symptoms can kind of... Is that the one?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, that's what it was.
It's like yeah.
So what kind of things would we be looking out for? Sorry, in terms of PMS.
Okay, yeah. I was like, So I think there's a few things to kind of note in terms of, say you didn't get pregnant in that menstrual cycle and your progesterone does drop. It's not uncommon to kind of, for your mood to kind of dip a little bit, your energy, like feel a bit more emotional a day or two before your period. Like that's not uncommon. But in a kind of a healthy menstrual cycle, like you shouldn't have like big emotional ups and downs and things that may be caused by kind of hormonal impact. So if you're really suffering for more than a day or two before your period starts, in the luteal phase, so say you get PMS symptoms like a week or more before your period starts, like that's kind of a bit of an indicator that you want to be looking into maybe what's going on and supporting your progesterone. Also things like tender breasts, if you get that before your period starts, that can be, there's an imbalance of estrogen and progesterone in that second half of the cycle. Estrogen is still present in the second half of the cycle. It's just not as like comparatively as at high levels as progesterone is. So if the progesterone isn't high enough, that's when you can get like really sore or like tender breasts and things. What other things are there? I think they're kind of some of the big ones progesterone wise.
And can you that's just struck me. Can you tell us a little bit as well about BBT charts in the luteal phase? Because again, if somebody's taking their BBT chart, which is basal body temperature charting, which we are going to talk about in our next episode, there would be signs that there's a luteal phase problem by looking at their temperatures. So can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
So when you're throughout the whole menstrual cycle, your body temperature is going to change ever so slightly due to where you are in your menstrual cycle. So after you've ovulated, progesterone has a heating effect on the body. So what we should expect is the temperature to go up and to stay up. If your temperatures are kind of hopping around all over the place, there are a few things that you can do to hopefully stabilize them. But once you've done those stabilizing things, such as putting your thermometer in your mouth for 10 minutes before you take a temperature, then it could be that your progesterone is kind of like dipping up and down, or like we're seeing like luteal phase defect where there's like issues with progesterone there. Also, if your temperature, what else is there? Just you can see that once the temperature goes up, and then if you only have like 8 or 9 days before your next period starts, then that's an indicator that your luteal phase is short, because what's that showing us is those 8 high temperatures post ovulation, and then getting a period would suggest you've only got an 8-day luteal phase, which is on the short side. The other thing would be about, because progesterone has that heating effect on the body, if you're not seeing a nice clear temperature rise in the second half of the cycle. So if it kind of, the temperature goes up a little bit, but your graph is quite hard to read, then that could kind of be an indicator that maybe we need to be supporting progesterone. That temperature shift should be really clear and obvious. So there are a few of the kind of like typical telltale signs of progesterone issues through BBT.
Great. And what are the common, like, what are the big hitters around progesterone? Because obviously it's really complicated, isn't it? In that there are medical reasons why you might have issues with your luteal phase and your progesterone, and then there are lifestyle issues that could be impacting your luteal phase and your progesterone. So can you talk us through like the main medical reasons why you might have problems with your progesterone or your luteal phase?
Okay, in terms of the medical things that could be impacting the luteal phase, and I guess the menstrual cycle as a whole. So something that you can see is with like your thyroid. We know that can have a really big impact on fertility. So if you're getting your thyroid tested as well, I'd say it's just really important to make sure you're speaking to your doctor about the fact you're trying to conceive, because sometimes they really like narrow down the reference ranges that they use in terms of where your like TSH should be. Your prolactin. So if your prolactin is very high, which can be caused by stress, but there's other factors that could influence your prolactin being high. And if your prolactin's high, that disrupts ovulation and then could impact the luteal phase. Other hormonal imbalances, so say if your like FSH was really high, and so FSH is that follicle stimulating hormone, it's helping the follicles to develop the eggs that will eventually be ovulated. And if there's issues there, then if there's too much FSH, it's like they get overstimulated, the ovaries get overstimulated, and then that can cause issues with ovulation. And then if ovulation is disrupted, then that could impact the luteal phase as well. And I guess it's impacting the luteal phase because of poor follicular development. So if we're thinking about, well, I guess the reason why poor follicular development would have an impact on the luteal phase is that when the follicles start to mature and the egg then ovulates, so the egg is housed inside the follicle. The egg bursts out the follicle, and the shell of the follicle that's left behind is what turns into the corpus luteum. So you want your eggs to be of like good quality, essentially, not only for the egg itself, but also the fact that what's left behind is what's going to be producing your progesterone. So if poor follicular development is an issue, then we can see that show up in the luteal phase. And poor follicular development can happen in issues such as like PCOS. So say you have a very long follicular phase, and then lots of follicles developing but not properly, then that could impact the luteal phase. And the same with other kind of estrogen dominant conditions, where if there's these like either long follicular phases, or like the follicular phase is just a bit crazy because estrogen is relatively speaking high, then that could disrupt the luteal phase. So and then the other one medically was post-contraception. So when you come off the pill, effectively what the pill or any kind of hormonal contraception is doing is it's turning off your reproductive system in some capacity, if we're putting it super simply. And it takes a bit of time for everything to kind of reset and be like, okay, we're ovulating, like how do we do this? And it can take a bit of time for your body to adjust and get back into those healthy parameters. So as we were just talking about with poor follicular development, post-contraception, it can take between like 6 to 12 cycles for that to really normalize again. So if you're coming off contraception in order to try and conceive, don't be alarmed if your luteal phase or your cycles in general aren't within all the parameters that we talk about as being like healthy, optimal, straight away, it can take a bit of time for them to settle down and get into a place that's what we would consider to be optimal.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the lifestyle factors that can influence progesterone. So it is well documented that progesterone can be really impacted by the presence of high levels of stress. So it is, I think they call it the progesterone steal. So that the base hormone that comes before progesterone, that hormone can either make your progesterone or it can make your stress hormones. And when you are stressed, it has to choose which one it is going to make. And it will always choose the stress hormones over the progesterone hormone. So high levels of stress can really impact your progesterone levels, which can then impact your cycle and your ability to conceive. And you know, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because this podcast is called Don't Tell Me to Relax. So I am in no way going to say everybody who's got issues with their progesterone needs to relax, because I know it's not as simple as that. And when we talk about stress, it's such a complex, deeply personal situation that affects people. But so I'm not going to say just relax at all. But what I am going to say is that it is a factor and it can be a link. And it's highly likely it's not the only link. You know, as we always say in this podcast, there are many issues that are impacting your fertility. There are many issues probably that are impacting your progesterone levels, and stress will be one of them, but it will only be one of them. So I say that with love and kindness, because I don't want people to think that I'm, you know, basically saying everything that we refuse to say on this podcast.
Just go on holiday.
Just have my sex. So I'm definitely not saying that, but I am just making you aware that there is a definite link between the two of those. The other thing that really helps support progesterone are things like sleeping well, eating well, not exercising too much. So again, we always return to this idea of, you know, if your body's feeling safe and nourished, then it is the best state you can get it in to produce the best hormones to support your menstrual cycle. So I would definitely, you know, always look at all of those areas. And of course, I'm going to say acupuncture and reflexology is amazing, because it is. So I'm just going to give that a plug there. But the other thing that I'm going to talk about is the fact that you know, lots and lots of people message us all the time. It's work. Number one DM we get is about luteal phase support and supporting people's progesterone. And I'd say it's really, really complicated, because, you know, people are like, what can I do in the luteal phase to support my progesterone? What supplements can I take? You know, should I take vitamin E? Should I take Vitex? You know, should I take magnesium? Get millions and millions of questions. Not millions, it's a slight exaggeration. I might get one or two. Get millions
and millions.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, we get a few questions now and then about progesterone and how you can support progesterone. And what I always say is, it's not as simple as being able to supplement that second half of your menstrual cycle. As Katie has said, you've got to look at the first half. You've got to look at what is happening in that follicular phase that could be then influencing the second phase. Because in many ways, only looking at the luteal phase and thinking about what you can do in the luteal phase is like, what's that phrase? And I never get it right. I'm so bad for these.
I'm bad at phrases.
Shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Is that right?
I have no idea.
You know what? No. Anyway, you know what I mean.
I'm
shutting the stable door after. Yeah. So yeah,
it sounds
that
right.
makes sense. Shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. Basically saying that if you're only looking at if you're only addressing the luteal phase, it's not the best way of doing it.
Yeah. No.
Is what I'm going to say. So, what can you do? So we've got lifestyle, we've got nutrition, acupuncture, reflexology, addressing stress where possible, checking out your sleep. What about cycle monitoring, Katie? Because lots of people that we work with in clinic often have this, you know, they have concerns about their luteal phase. And often what we recommend to people is we recommend that they go and do what's called cycle monitoring. And this is, I think, is a really good in-between thing that you can do, intervention that isn't full on IVF, but it can give you so much information. So Can you talk us through what do we mean by cycle monitoring and what's involved and why would you do it?
So with cycle monitoring, what it is looking at, or like the type that we're talking about is with the scans, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Just checking.
Yeah.
So the type of cycle monitoring that we're referring to is where you go on a regular basis throughout your menstrual cycle and go and get a scan to see what is happening with your uterus and ovaries. So that way you can get a full picture of how things are progressing throughout the menstrual cycle. So it's not like you're just going in one day and getting a snapshot of what that looks like. You get the context of the whole menstrual cycle. And I think the same way you were just talking about shutting the door before the horse does whatever it does. It's kind of like you need to look at the whole menstrual cycle to really understand what's happening, because it's a menstrual cycle. There's several weeks in it, and looking at just one day or one part of it is really like putting the blinkers on, and like we need to like look at all of it. So with that, what we can see is how are the follicles developing? Is there a dominant follicle that's going to be producing the most estrogen? They'll be able to see on these scans when you've ovulated, because they'll be able to see the corpus luteum starting to form and how big the corpus luteum is. And if you get any like blood tests done as well, and that can kind of give you a picture of what your hormones are doing. So it's really helpful, I think, just to get that broader picture of what's happening and to kind of provide reassurance that actually, this is a healthy cycle. Remembering we've talked about so many times, there's lots of various things that make a cycle healthy. And maybe you've got like a 12-day luteal phase and I don't know, your cycle's only 24 days. Like maybe that's a bit on the short side actually, but like say 26-day cycle, like it could still be really healthy if when we can see physically what's happening inside your body, then it just helps to give us a lot more clarity and hopefully a bit of reassurance as to either what's going on or what way to go forward.
Yes. And I think the difference with that and a progesterone test, because lots of people say, I've had a progesterone test done, because that seems to be the main test that's done in the luteal phase. And they say, okay, and I've been told my progesterone is fine. So, and then they're like, but my period comes 10 days after I've ovulated. And that is the problem with the progesterone test, is because really a progesterone test is not actually telling you about your progesterone levels. It's telling you it's confirming whether or not you have ovulated. And so it's really good to have that in your mind, because your progesterone levels go up and down every single day. And it might be, if you on day 21, let's say you ovulated on day 14, you went for your progesterone test 7 days later, and on day 21 you were told that your progesterone was normal and there's no problem. But it could be that for whatever reason your progesterone is dropping very, very quickly, and that your period then comes on day 10. And so your progesterone was fine at the point of being tested, but 3 days later it completely drops and your period starts. So you've only got a 10-day luteal phase, therefore you've not got an optimal cycle, and yet you've been told, well, you've got a normal progesterone test, so everything's fine. And so I guess what the point is that I'm trying to say in a very long roundabout way is that by doing scanning, by doing cycle monitoring, you can see that problem much clearer, because they can see, yes, you've ovulated, but actually they often say, okay, we can see signs that your endometrium is beginning to shed, or your endometrium is too thin. And so again, that is giving you a better indication that you have got an issue with progesterone, and it could be impacting your ability to conceive. So I think that is what is a real like gold bit of information when you're trying to understand your menstrual cycle and your fertility.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like there's all sorts that we can do, and we'll talk about that in the cycle tracking episode, what you can do to like know when you're ovulating. But ultimately the best way to know you're ovulating is for someone to have a look inside and see what's happening. Yeah. So I think it's it provides a lot of information, and I think being able to see through the whole cycle what's happening. And like you said about like, the lining shedding early, like you might get some spotting and things, but just to get that info, I think is just invaluable.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm going to talk about a little bit about now is about progesterone, because again, the number one question that millions of people, not millions, but a few people ask us is about how can they get their hands on progesterone, and
I did have someone just yesterday. So it is a
There
common.
you go. You see, millions, Katie, millions. So lots of people ask us, I've got a problem with my luteal phase. I really want to get progesterone to support it. And I am a big fan of using progesterone because it can be revolutionary. And we've seen some of the best results we've ever had in clinic have come from lots of different things working together. But the thing that really sealed it was by using progesterone and really optimizing a menstrual cycle. But what I will say, and actually it needs a full episode to talk about this because it is so important. I think progesterone is not like the cure for everybody. I think when you've tried everything else, so when you've addressed your lifestyle, you've done all your bloods, you've made sure that your tubes are clear, so there's no blockage, so we know that sperm and egg can meet. When you check the sperm, when you know that you're definitely ovulating, when you've done all your bloods, and you still can't optimize that luteal phase of your menstrual cycle, then I think in that situation, taking progesterone can be really helpful. And there are quite a few fertility clinics now that will offer this. So instead of going straight for IVF, if they can see clearly that there is no other issue other than the luteal phase deficit. If you've got an other issue, then it's probably not worth your while doing. But if you have got this luteal phase problem, and as you say, you've ruled out everything else, then clinics will often prescribe progesterone to use in the luteal phase. And you need to start it 3 days after you've ovulated. So you really need to know when you're ovulating, because if you take it too soon, it can stop ovulation and therefore completely mess up your cycle. And then you take the progesterone for approximately 12 days. Different consultants recommend different levels, different number of days to take it, but approximately 12 days. And then at 12 days, you do a test and you see if you're pregnant or not. And if you're pregnant, obviously you keep taking the progesterone. And if you're not pregnant, you stop and you wait for your period to start, and then you go into the next cycle. And what's interesting is, like, over the years, this has come in and out of fashion from what I've seen, because I've done quite a bit of research into it, because I'm always really interested in that. It seems to me like a low cost, easy win for some people. But it seems like people are very reluctant. Lots of people feels like they're very reluctant to go down this path. And I think it was last year, ESHRA did a study saying that there is an advantage to doing it and in certain cases. So it is definitely something that I recommend you look into if you tick all the boxes that we've just mentioned. There's a lot of whenever I speak to consultants about it, there's often a lot of fear that people won't use the medication correctly, and therefore it will impact their cycle. So that seems to be the main resistance I hear from clinicians, because it's not like other drugs. You can't really take too much progesterone. There are very few negative side effects other than if you take it too soon before you ovulate, it can mess up your cycle. So it's a safe to use medication that could really help optimize luteal phases. So here endeth my progesterone chat, but it's we will do a whole episode on this, because cycle monitoring and progesterone support, I feel like it's a good topic and it's relevant to lots of people. So we will do that in the future. Katie, anything else to?
I think so. I think we've covered most of it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's a really helpful episode. And what I'm going to say is our next week's episode is going to be all about tracking. So if cycle monitoring is not an option, I think cycle monitoring, we could say, is like the gold standard. And I would say, but there are lots of other ways that you can track your cycle to see how it's working. And that is what we're going to talk about next time. So Katie, as always, thank you very much. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you too.
We hope you have found this episode helpful. If you'd like to leave us a review, we would love you to bits. And if you'd like more support for your fertility, you can come and work with us in clinic. We're based in London and around the UK, or you can work with us online. For more information, see the link at the end of the show.